I'm really excited to introduce to you Rachel Galanter from the Exchange Family Center in Durham, North Carolina, and she's going to give us some skills to help us get in our resilient zone. And so, Rachel, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you go through, introduce yourself to the team.
So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. But first, a quick logistics. If you're not speaking, please mute. If you have a question or you're going to step away and I haven't answered your question yet, please put that in the chat. We are going to have some group assignments later today where we're going to get a chance to practice. You can opt out and just practice on your own in your own space. But if you want to practice with other people, we want to make that really work for you. If there are people you want in your group because you're more comfortable with them, because you feel safe being vulnerable with them, please chat directly to Katie and she will make sure those people in your group. Likewise, on the flip side, if there's somebody who you respect, but they stress you out and it's going to make it hard for you to be vulnerable or comfortable practicing, please message Katie directly that as well. And we'll make sure that your group is a group where you feel good practicing. It is really important that you do that directly to Katie instead of publicly. We don't want to make anybody feel really uncomfortable. And then at the end, there'll be a chance to give some feedback and do an evaluation. So who am I? My name is Rachel Galanter. I'm the Executive Director of the Exchange Family Center. This is my 20th year here at the Exchange Family Center. I'm a North Carolina certified parent educator, and I have been doing in-home work with children and families using evidence-based models, attachment biobehavioral catch-up, safe care, parent-child interaction therapy, triple P positive parenting program to help parents be able to be responsive and nurturing of their children and reduce challenging behavior and build those strong attachments that help children to thrive now and as they grow and be resilient in the face of adverse childhood events. I'm a teacher in the community resilience model because what we found was until we help people get in that space of felt safety, they couldn't absorb these other messages we were trying to share. And that a lot of times, in order to address trauma and stress in children and babies, we have to make sure that that adult generation has the support and skills they need to get in their resiliency zone. So those lessons learned are things I'm going to share with you. On the personal side, I was a foster parent for 10 years and I took 2 children, made them my own, and now have 4 grandchildren. So this isn't just work for me. This is how do we live life in a way that helps people move past trauma and overwhelming stress into a place where they can be resilient and thrive. And how do we do that for ourselves, for our families, for our staff, for our clients? So we're going to talk about easy ways to express how trauma and stress affect the brain. And how to use those tools for self-care to reset our nervous systems when it's thrown out of balance, and use those skills not just for ourselves, but to support the people who depend on us and who other people depend on to get in their resilience zone, right? So this is both for us and for our staff and for our clients and for them to share in their networks. So the tool we're going to be using today was developed by the Community Resiliency model. I'm having some tongue-tied moments right now. The Community Resiliency model is the set of tools we're going to be talking about. It was developed by the Trauma Resource Institute. And you can learn more about the research behind the model, where it's been tested, both in America and around the world, so that you have confidence in this tool if you want more information about that. It's ultimately intended for anyone for little kids, for adults, for teenagers, for people who are professionals to use for themselves and their clients, and for people to use in their own families and networks and for self-care. These 6 wellness skills are easy to learn. They don't require you to reflect on the traumatic experiences you've had or the stressful experiences you've had. They don't require literacy skills. They can be used for people from all different cultures and ethnic backgrounds. They've been successfully used internationally, as well as with many different cultures in the United States. They can be used for children, for teenagers, for adults, and that there are materials, free materials that go with this information that you can use as well, including the iChill app that people can download on their phones or on their computers if they want. Ultimately, this is because many of the behavioral and public health problems we see are really just people's efforts to cope with adverse childhood experiences, poverty, and racism. And so we don't want to stigmatize people for coping. We want to give them ways to cope that are going to continue to support them in thriving. Those coping mechanisms are in response to different kinds of trauma. And trauma could have been one big, dramatic, horrible thing, whether it's a natural disaster or a sexual assault, or it could have been something smaller scale, a car accident or a medical procedure that was traumatizing and created a lot of stress in the moment. Or it could be a cumulative experience of too much, too fast, or too little in a sustained way, right? Not having enough resources that constantly drained your energy because of poverty, or too much exposure to noise and a negative physical environment that was constant. All of that, though, is through the lens of our perception of the event, right? What one person finds to be a big tree trauma, another could find to be a little tree trauma, and another person could not experience trauma at all from that same moment. Likewise, what one person finds to be a cumulatively traumatic experience, another person could live through and not have been traumatized by. That this is an individualized perception. What is overwhelming to one person's nervous system is different from what is overwhelming to another person's nervous system. And that we want to help people who have experienced trauma or chronic stress or that overwhelming experience learn how to stabilize their nervous systems and get into a place where they can self-regulate and move forward and not be impaired by that traumatic experience. Ultimately, we are hardwired in a moment of crisis to survive, and that we have all successfully done, right? Your nervous system has done what it needed to do to get you to survive, and the proof is you've all survived and you're all here. And that those survival responses are automatic. They occur during times of threat, and that if the environment is threatening, then you can live in that survival mode as long as you need to until you can get through it. And we can reset our nervous systems so that things that are currently triggering us to move into survival mode can be addressed in different ways. Ultimately, that is what the community resiliency model is about, is stabilizing our nervous systems so that we can face triggers that in the past would have sent us into survival mode that really are not signs that we are currently in danger, and respond to them without being stuck in survival mode when that's not where we need to be. The resiliency model focuses on this strength in people. And I know we've been talking about this in this conference in the context of how these difficult times we're in right now have brought out creativity and new skills that people didn't know they had. We can learn new skills, including self-regulation skills, so that we can cope with things that were inducing suffering by building on what's working for us and our strengths. Instead of just focusing on treating trauma, also being aware of people's ability to heal themselves. So there are 3 key concepts of the community resiliency model that I'm going to go over really quickly. And then we're going to shift into what are those 6 skills of wellness and how can we use them so that you leave here with actual tangible things to use. So first, that we all have a resilient zone where we're able to handle the stresses of life. That zone doesn't mean we're happy or not experiencing difficulty. We can be annoyed, angry, sad, but we are functional within that zone. And when something comes along and triggers us, a stressful event, a thing that reminds us of some past experience that was threatening to us, we can get bumped out of that zone into survival mode. And that being bumped up is that fight or flight aspect of survival mode, right? And that may be expressed as being edgy, irritable, manic, anxious, being angry. We may feel it in a somatic way as pain, or it may come out in that freeze mode, depression, sadness, exhaustion, fatigue, numbness, right? But that's okay. That's how we're supposed to respond, so that in a moment of stress where your child runs out into the street, you have that burst of adrenaline, that fear that allows you to run into the street and get them before they get hurt. On the flip side, sometimes something is so stressful, you can't deal with it right now and move through the steps that you need to in terms of taking care of your child. And so you just function in a numb state so that you can do what you need to do. It's like applying the brakes and the gas in a car. Sometimes we want to apply the brakes really quickly so that we don't hit something. And likewise, sometimes we need to hit the gas to avoid an obstacle. The problem isn't being bumped out of the zone. The problem isn't having brakes and gas. It's when you're stuck in the zone. If you were on the highway and instead of applying the brakes, suddenly you were stuck with your foot on the brake and you couldn't accelerate again, right? That would be a problem, not just for you, but for all the drivers around you as well. Likewise, on the flip side, sometimes you need to accelerate to pass somebody to avoid an obstacle. That's not a problem. The problem is when your foot is stuck on the gas. It's a problem for you, and it's a problem for those around you. So after a highly traumatic or stressful event, even when there's no threat, we may see things in the environment that remind us of the threat we faced. And that stress can cause a person to move into survival mode and result in people getting stuck in the high zone or stuck in the low zone or stuck going back and forth. And when we're out of our resiliency zone, we can't concentrate, right? That's not when our full brain is functioning. That's when the survival brain is in charge. Because of significant amounts of trauma, or a parent who experienced significant amount of trauma, some people have a more narrow resilience zone. This isn't destiny. It just means it's more narrow now. And because of neuroplasticity, you can expand your resilience zone over time. A wider zone means people can face more difficulty and stresses without getting bumped out of their zone. But even being bumped out of your zone is not problematic if you are able to recoup and not get stuck in the high or low zone. Key concept 2, this is not a fault of the system. This is not a fault of an individual if you're getting stuck in the high or low zone. This is our biology. This is how our bodies are meant to work. That ultimately, our responses to trauma and to high levels of stress and to crisis are hardwired into our human biology. And it's reminding ourselves of that and not feeling like there's something wrong with us when we have post-traumatic stress or difficulty staying in our resilience zone. Trauma and stress have common reactions, both cognitive, spiritual, in our relationships, in our feelings, in our behavior, in our bodies. And that we don't have to feel like there's something wrong with us when we are having these symptoms if we have been through, whether it's a small trauma, a big trauma, or that cumulative effect of ongoing excess or lack, right? And that these things can happen in response to adverse childhood experiences, adult traumatic experiences, neglect, living with racism, living in poverty, and that having these things as part of your life isn't something you should feel bad about or wrong about. That ultimately our brakes and our accelerator are part of our autonomic nervous system, and that when we experience something that's threatening, our sympathetic nervous system prepares for action by making sure that we are going to be able to fight or run away or freeze so that we are not obvious to the predator, right? And in that moment, we don't need to work on digesting our food. We don't need to work on healing. We don't need our reproductive system to have energy. What we need is our heart rate up, our breathing up, our pupils dilated. We need our blood pressure high so that there's blood getting to those limbs. We want our stress hormones to help us with moving fast and responding to survive. And when the crisis is over, our parasympathetic nervous system comes on board, our breathing rate goes down, our heart rate goes down, our pupils constrict, our blood pressure goes down, right? Our stress hormones come down, and those systems we don't need in a crisis, digestion, reproduction, healing, come back. And so we may notice more saliva in our mouth. We may notice some gurglings in our digestive system because that system was on hold and now it's coming back on board. Ultimately, our brains are designed to make us survive, to eat, heal, and reproduce another day in a moment of crisis. And that it's amazing, elegant design. And because neurons that fire together, wire together, our brains can change. That as we have new experiences and pay attention to new things, our neural connections as a result of what we notice and what we pay attention to and what we experience can also change. You can build new, more resilient pathways. Is it easier to build great pathways and that great foundation when we're really little? Yes, definitely, right? We have a huge amount of growth during the first 3 years, and our brain is developing. If we can set up those good foundations, that's fantastic. Just like it's fantastic to learn more than one language when you're really little. You can become a native speaker in more than one language. It's easy to learn. You don't even have to think about it. And then when we're in our teenage years, there's also a lot of ease in obtaining a second language, right? There's a whole bunch of neural plasticity and trimming that's going on, and it's an opportunity to learn. And we probably can learn more easily and become more fluent if we learn that second language in our teenage years than if we choose to learn it in our adulthoods. But as a person who learned to speak Spanish at 27 and uses it all the time to communicate both with my family and professionally, you can gain fluency in a language as an adult. You can build new neural pathways and get them firing well as an adult. It's not impossible. It's just harder than when you're younger. And so because of the elegant design of our brains, it is completely possible to build those new, more resilient pathways. Key concept 3 is just a reminder of the parts of the brain that we all have a survival brain that carries out fight, flight, freeze unconsciously, right? And it also controls digestion, reproduction, circulation, breathing. We don't have to think about breathing. We don't have to think about our eggs releasing, right? That these things happen in the survival brain. The cortex, the thinking part of our brain, the front of our brain, if you want to use the Dan Siegel model of the brain, if you've ever been talked about that. So here, this is our base survival brain. This is our limbic system, where our emotions are and where we do risk assessment. And then here is the frontal cortex at the top, where we have language and thought and speech. If you're trying to support somebody through conversation, through teaching them things, right? We need this part of the brain engaged. When the limbic system says threat alert, right? That's the fire alarm of the brain, the smoke alarm. When it senses that threat, then we can't have our cognitive processing, because this is telling us it's time to focus on survival. And so we can't simultaneously be thinking and working on how to survive. It's one or the other. And so we need to diffuse the threat and let our limbic system know we are safe, and that our bodies and brains are so connected that we can, by paying attention to sensations in the body that align with the parasympathetic nervous system, slowing our breathing, paying attention to our heart rate, and calming those things, then the message goes back through the limbic area, nope, we're safe now, and we can re-engage our cortex and our thinking. All right, moving into the skills, right? And this is the part you want, right? It's great to know all that. That's a good refresher. Hopefully it gives you a quick, easy way to share that information with other people. What are these skills? There are 6 skills, and they all revolve around tracking. So we're going to talk about tracking first, and then we'll talk about resourcing as a way to help us with really giving us a way to look at tracking even better. And then we'll look at grounding, gesturing, help now, and shift and stay. So tracking is like biofeedback with no fancy tools that go beep. Tracking is learning to pay attention to our sensations as a way to help us stabilize our nervous system and use other CRIM skills. That's the community resilience model. They use CRIM as an abbreviation. And that by exploring sensations connected to well-being, we can intentionally activate our parasympathetic nervous system to continue us into a cycle of being in sensations of wellness. So if we can attend to our nervous system and notice when we're having sensations of distress and sensations of well-being, when we can read that well, then we can choose intentionally to pay attention to sensations of well-being and move ourselves into more sensations of well-being. That physical experience of our sensations is because our thoughts and feelings all have corresponding sensations within our bodies. So as we shift from the accelerator to the brakes, right? From our sympathetic nervous system telling us survival mode is needed, ramp up, and to bringing on board our parasympathetic nervous system and releasing that stress and energy, you'll notice in your nervous system that a biological process is happening to go along with our shift in emotion. Sensations can include trembling, right? You'll notice when you were really stressed and now you're past the moment of crisis, you may see trembling. tingling, yawning. Your stomach might gurgle, you might burp, you might feel warmth or cooling down, right? That transition has a physical component to it. And that when you notice those sensations of release and are aware of them, you can help yourself more quickly reset your nervous system. We talk a lot in our world of supporting people about our feelings, but the community resiliency model focuses on learning language of sensation, noticing things like shaking, twitching, trembling, whether it's quick or slow, being able to talk about the size of something, right? Deep breaths, shallow breaths. Was it a big tension or a small tension? The temperature we're experiencing, hot, cold, warm, cooling, warming, neutral. Are we feeling pain? Is it intense, medium, mild? Is there no pain? How are our muscles feeling? Are they tight or loose? Breathing, calm, rapid, shallow, light. Is our heart beating fast? Is it beating slow? Is it rhythmic? Is it fluttery? Noticing tastes, being able to talk about whether things feel heavy or light, whether something feels firm or gentle, right? That we're moving beyond just talking about our feelings to talking about the sensations in our body. And that for some people, attending to sensations can trigger unpleasant or even painful sensations. So I want to invite you to participate in these exercises, but also to be aware of what works for you and to take care of yourself. That if I'm suggesting you try something and you find yourself sensing uncomfortable sensations, you can try to bring your attention to pleasant or neutral sensations instead. But if it's too difficult, you can just stop. So when people are stressed or traumatized, the sensations tend to be shallow breathing, rapid heart rate, tense muscles, pain, cold or chill, and numbness. And when we're feeling resilient, we see deeper breaths, slower heart rate, relaxed muscles, we're grounded, we're calm, we experience cooling or warming. And then there's that transitional part of release, shaking, trembling, burping, yawning, right? Vibration. So noticing sensations in our bodies as a way to help us be more resilient. So how do we track? We literally just try and notice those sensations, what's happening on the inside. And then is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And try and bring our attention to anything that is pleasant or neutral. Ideally pleasant, but if there's nothing pleasant, at least neutral. So if you're helping someone else do this, the questions you would ask are, what are you noticing on the inside? And is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So when you're supporting somebody else, we think of you as a guide because you're inviting people to become more aware of their sensations, and you are then helping them to focus on things that are pleasant or neutral, but it's all invitational, right? We don't tell people do this. We invite them to do it so that they can continue to take care of themselves. When you're doing this, when you're guiding someone else, you're asking open questions, giving them time to notice and develop sensations. We're being non-judgmental, and we're not directing or assuming what anyone's feeling or experiencing. Ultimately, using the other CRIM skills gives us a really good way to practice tracking and to notice what's going on in our nervous system. And so we are going to transition over into resourcing. When we develop resources and we focus on our resources and track our neutral and pleasant sensations when we're focused on that resource, we are developing more neural pathways of positivity and wellness because those cells that fire together wire together. So Resourcing is using pleasant or neutral factors to experience sensations of well-being, and there are all different kinds of resources. So you may have in the past been encouraged to take a mental vacation to focus on a place where you feel good and describe that place, right? Whether it's a beach or your bed or your car, right? And that you're have been asked to focus on that experience. Think about what it smells like, tastes like, what sensations you have, what things you touch when you're there, what you see, what you hear, that you're creating that vivid mental image, mental experience. I guess it's more than just an image, right? And so that's one type of resource, those memories of people, places, activities. It could be a skill or a hobby, it could be a spiritual guide, an animal, anything that gives you joy or peace or calm. But it could also be an imagined resource, right? Something that's not a thing you've actually experienced. It could be Wakanda. It could be a place that you hope to one day go. It could be your vision of paradise. Or it could be actual internal resources, like focusing on kindness or compassion or humor, things that you're proud of about yourself, or strengths of your body, your legs, your ability to heal from an illness, your healing journey. So whatever your resources are, that's what we would want to use. And we don't necessarily know all the time what other people's resources are. So instead of saying, envision yourself at the beach, but for somebody, they may have had a traumatic experience at the beach. So we want to make sure that we have people explore their own resources. If Katie could put this link in the chat, the Devereaux Adult Resilience Survey is one way to help people focus on their resources, whether that's something you want to use for your team or something you want to use for the teen parents you're working with, or something you want to use in your own personal life. So resourcing, once again, it can be a person, place, activity, our own faith, our own strengths. And that when we focus on that, we can then notice the sensations happening in our body. And if they're pleasant or neutral, continue to focus on them. And that when we have those pleasant and neutral sensations, it can help people come back into their resilience zone, because it's telling the body, we don't need to be in survival mode. I'm having pleasant and neutral sensations. The parasympathetic nervous system is kicking in, or can accelerate kicking in. Once somebody has identified a resource, you as the guide can ask additional questions to help them expand the sensations that they're experiencing. That helps them intensify the sensations and helps them override attention that might automatically go to unpleasant sensations. So sometimes when we're discussing a resource with somebody, it can shift out of pleasant sensations into difficult memories or uncomfortable body sensations. For example, if somebody was thinking about their grandmother as a resource, they may shift into thinking about when she died and the sadness around that. And that may be then begin to morph from pleasant body sensations to unpleasant sensations. And a resource can have lots of different parts. We want to gently invite that person to shift back to positive aspects of the resource. Inviting awareness of a part of the body might feel more comfortable or neutral. And often people can then learn to hold both parts of the resource and strengthen that resource. But if it's too hard, they might want to select another resource to focus on. So now comes an interactive part. I know I've been talking a lot and reminding you of things you already know. Write down 3 resources, 3 things that provide you with strength, joy, calm. And then circle 1. And then write down 3 details about the one that you've picked. And then read it out loud to yourself. And then as you read about it, just pay attention to what's happening on the inside. And then if you're with somebody and want to share that resource with a friend, you can do that. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to do this, but I want to make sure there's time when I'm not talking for you to actually try this exercise. And then at the end of that, we will do a little poll to see what people's experience was doing this exercise. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes. It's not very long, but we don't have much longer together. Some people are probably still in this exercise and some people have wrapped up. I'm hoping that you tried it out, and we're going to do a little poll to see what your experience was of doing this, right? So my resource was the Eno River that I picked of my 3. And I notice on the inside, when I think about walking by the river and the sound and the sights, I notice my breathing slow down. I notice my shoulders relax a little bit, right? And my sensation is positive, it's pleasant. Let's see how this is for you. So, skill 2, just something to think about as we're thinking about how do we use this with people in crisis, things that can pull their attention to positive experiences. Can you tell me the moment you knew you had survived? Can you tell me the moment help arrived? Who or what is helping you most right now? So helping them activate their ideas of the resources, and then once they've got those resources, to be able to focus in on the sensations they notice in their body when they think about those resources, and help them feel that, which is going to help them get in that resiliency zone. If somebody has experienced a loss of a loved one, can you tell me some of your meaningful memories of him or her? What did you like to do together? What kinds of words of encouragement would they say during difficult times? If somebody picks a questionable resource, so if you asked, what is helping you get through the most right now? And they pick smoking, right? Yes, smoking is helping them get through. And we don't necessarily want to develop more strong neural pathways around smoking. So we don't want to necessarily focus on that resource. And we would want to check with them if they're open to maybe exploring any other things that are healthier resources that we could talk about, so that we're not building in even more strong neural positive connections around smoking that will make it harder for them to quit later. Right. Skill number 3, grounding. Grounding is direct contact of your body or part of your body with something that provides it support, right? So some people think of grounding exercises about noticing yourself in the chair, but it can be grounding against any surface, even water that holds you up. It can be against a wall or a tree, our feet with the ground, the chair or the ground that we're sitting on. Maybe it's laying on the ground or the bed, anything where a surface is supporting you. Some people find that sitting in a chair and grounding in a chair is not soothing to them because they had to sit in a chair extensively and as a punishment in their childhood, or they associate it with long stretches of lack of control that they experienced in a school setting, or they, for some other reason, find the chair traumatic. Some people really find leaning against a wall or pushing against a wall is a much more positive way to ground. So we don't want to sort of say there's one right way to ground, and not everybody finds grounding soothing. So this is one of our tools. I'm going to give you a chance to do a grounding exercise. You can opt out. It's going to take about a minute. If you don't want to do this, take care of yourself. If grounding doesn't work for you, or the place that you're in right now isn't a good place to do this, go ahead and skip. But I'm going to ask you at the end of this to think about what sensations you notice on the inside, and if they were positive, neutral, or negative. So find a comfortable position, whether it's sitting or standing or pushing against a wall or leaning. And pay attention to how your body is making contact with the surfaces that you're touching. Bring your attention to any sensations that are pleasant or neutral. Notice what part of your body is most supported. Notice your breathing, your heart rate, your muscles, the parts of your body in contact with the surface. Bring awareness to how the parts of your body that are in contact with the surface are supported. What is happening on the inside? If you notice any uncomfortable sensations, just bring your attention back to things that feel neutral or better and notice the change. Starting with your head, slowly scan your body and bring attention to sensations that are pleasant or neutral in your head, in your neck, in your shoulders, in your core, in your hips, in your legs, in your arms, in your hands and feet. And when you're ready, rejoin me. So I'm going to ask those of you who have the ability to use annotate. It should be in your taskbar. There's a little pencil that says annotate. Some people have to find it under more or other. And if you can, you go to annotate and you go to text, and you can either use the chat or use the text feature of annotate. If you can write what sensations you noticed in your body from grounding, any sensations you noticed, and if they were pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And that idea of you notice the stiffness and you began to relax, right? Fantastic. Okay. I love what we've been able to do with annotation as our workaround, but our poll is ready. And so if you want to put your answers into the poll, and we're going to use this poll right now about grounding, and then we'll do it again and see if people had different experiences around the resource activity. Thank you to those who are participating in the poll and to those of you who put things in the annotation. So for those of you who got to participate in our first poll, thank you for your answers. So most people experienced deeper or slower breathing, felt their heart rate slow down, felt their muscles relax, right? And it was just a minute, but people, about half noticed warmth in their body, and that about half felt like had some other sensations as well that were pleasant. And we're going to do a quick second poll to follow up on the grounding exercise. So of those sensations you noticed when you were doing the grounding exercise, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? So what we're seeing is that most people had some pleasant sensations who were responding to the polls, lots of neutral, but also some unpleasant. And I think that's important to remember too, that we think grounding is great for everybody, but it's not the tool for everyone. I'm looking at the time and I'm going to move on to make sure we get through all 6 of our skills and give you a chance to practice some other ones. So for gesturing and spontaneous movement, that is when we move our limbs to express our feelings, and that when we notice our own or have other people point out to us our self-calming, our gestures of release, our gestures of protection, our gestures of joy, our gestures of prayer, right? That these different gestures, that when we notice them, can actually also bring pleasant sensations or neutral sensations. And so I'm going to ask you to just do the first one take 3 seconds and think about a self-soothing gesture. And then at the count of 3, make that gesture whatever that is. 1, 2, 3. And as you do that gesture, do you notice what happens on the inside? Did it make you take a deep breath? Did it make you feel any warmth? So I want to make sure we have time for our help now and shift and stay. So I'm not going to do a poll about gestures. We're going to move into this final one, that when we are stuck in the high zone or the low zone, there are things that can help us right now to reset. And they can be as simple as drinking a glass of water, or looking around the room, or naming different colors we see, or counting backwards, or noticing the temperature, or paying attention to sounds, or walking and paying attention to our movement, or pushing against a wall or a door, doing that kind of grounding, and then noticing what's happening on the inside. And so we all have moments when we need to reset, where we're stuck in the high or low zone. And we want to be thinking about, how do we remind ourselves to use those strategies? Who can we trust to help us remember to try out the strategies we want? Somebody who we might want to help with reminding to use strategies, and that is part of wellness. So we are going to share with you some help now skills in a little bingo game. And we are going to send people out into breakout rooms for 5 minutes. And your goal is to do a row across, down, diagonal of the Help Now bingo. Give it a try. If you want to do it by yourself, wherever you are, do it by yourself. If you want to do it in the breakout rooms, accept your invitation to the breakout rooms. And that it's a chance for you to just see which ones work for you and which ones don't. Because just like grounding doesn't work for everyone, and gesturing doesn't work for everyone, and resourcing doesn't work for everyone, we want to get comfortable and know what things do work for us. This is also an exercise you can use with your own team or with a client. So can we send people off to breakout rooms for just 5 minutes, and then we're bringing you back? We'll do a quick poll how that went, and we'll be wrapping up our hour together. It's going fast. We're going to launch a poll and see what techniques people tried that were helpful to them or were not helpful to them, so we can share our results and share what people did get to try and how it worked. Hopefully you got to try something. I'm going to talk while you're taking your poll. Ultimately, when people are stuck in a negative space, we want to help them shift and stay in a more positive space. And that can be by reminding them of a resource, helping them with grounding, helping them attend to soothing gestures, helping them notice positive sensations, or at least neutral sensations, suggesting to them a Help Now technique. But since some work for some people and some work for others, we really want to help people think about this when they aren't already in a stage of crisis. So ultimately, these are things you can use for self-care, and having your own plan, thinking about what things really help you, can help you be prepared for those moments that are really difficult. We can also use them in our communities, right? How are we sharing this information and taking care of other people? And we have a handout that you can use to write up your own ideas for how you want to use these skills, both for yourselves and in the work you do and in your communities. And then if you complete that, you can email it to apptta@rti.org, and they can email it back to you in a month just to help you remember what it is that you want to be trying, those techniques that work for you, and the ways you want to be sharing this with other people. So look in the chat for that tool, and Katie put the email address in there as well. There's an app that's a free app called the iChill app that you can download that has information on these skills and grounding exercises and all those things that you can have right there on your phone. You can also share it with clients. It's free to anyone, because ultimately we need to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of other people, whether that's parents taking care of their children, us taking care of our clients, a staff person taking care of other staff people. We have to attend to all the different aspects of self-care. As a person who works to support other staff, there are tools out there that you can use that you can get an assessment of where people are in their wellness wheel or their professional quality of life, so that we're attending to, are people experiencing compassion fatigue, burnout, or even secondary traumatic stress. We need to take care of ourselves and have the tools to take care of ourselves and other people. And we need to know when things are in a position where they need extra attention. And that ultimately, I hope that you've found some strategies here that will help you take care of yourself, take care of your staff, take care of the people in your networks, and tools that you can use to support young parents and the people who depend on them. So ultimately, I hope you will fill out that tool, email it in, and get a reminder in a month of what it is you hope that you're doing to take care of yourself and to take care of those around you. Really, this is just reminding you of things you already know about taking care of yourself and how to help people be resilient. You've shown a lot of resilience during this tough year, and I hope that you'll continue to do things that help you focus on your wellness and your strength and continue to make those neural connections so that those things become easier and your resiliency zone widens, and it continues to be easier and easier to stay in your zone or to pop out briefly and not get stuck outside your zone. Thank you very much for your time, and feel free to email me directly with questions. I know that we have run out of time.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Did anyone have one or two questions that they wanted to ask? And we've done our best. Oh yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Rachel, have you heard of the changing in the vocabulary of using triggers, instead of using triggers, using cues?
I have not, but I love that. Right?
Yeah, it's something that they did a training on mental health and kind of working with, and as we're in schools and dealing with the students, we like to use the term trauma cues instead of trauma triggers, just because the term trigger itself triggers. So that's just something you might want to add like later. I don't know if you're.
I love that. Yeah, this is an iterative process where we all keep learning from each other. So I appreciate very much that. And that's something I definitely will add in, right? Helping us think of them as cues, because ultimately it's your body doing what it needs to do to protect you. There shouldn't be something negative about it.
Right.
Yeah. Other quick feedback or questions?
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you all very much. I'm really sorry about our technical difficulties with the polls, and I hope that you're able to share with each other which of these strategies work for you, and to continue to be mindful. This is all an individualized process, right? Just because it worked for you doesn't mean it's going to work for your coworker or your client. And we want to help people make their own plans that help them sustain and increase their wellness.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think with that, my job is to turn it over to Labrita White, who's going to be providing some closing remarks for the training.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. And Many thanks to you, Rachel, for such a dynamic presentation. We appreciate the information as well as some of the chat feedback. I know we had some technical issues, but we made it through with sharing some really critical information with grantees on today. So again, thank you both. And good afternoon, everyone. I am, again, Labrita White, one of the adolescent pregnancy prevention program managers. And I certainly must say, it's been an eventful 3 days filled with lots of energy, information sharing. We focused on reimagining your programs, and this is certainly a time, if none other, that reimagining and being creative and innovative is certainly important and critical. But I'm delighted to learn and to share with you that there were approximately 150 grantees that participated in the 3-day training. Not all in every single session, because we do know sometimes it's challenging in a virtual world to do so. But for the most part, it's been in the close to 100 for every session. So I applaud you for staying connected and engaged throughout the process. What was interesting for me is I listened into this morning's session as well as some others, but I heard some of your acknowledgements of how you're feeling. And I jotted down a few of those because I have those same feelings. And just to reiterate, definitely over the 3 days, there's been lots of energy. So you felt energized, recharged is what I heard. Understaffed, share that feeling as well sometimes, as well as hopeful and frustrated. So there is some frustration that occurs from time to time, but we can turn that glass upside down and say, is it half empty or is it half full? So using that frustration to also look for some opportunities for change and improvement. I heard the words optimistic and informed. So really great sharing there. Well, you've had a full agenda. Again, some very outstanding speakers who shared new tools, strategies, and ideas with you. And so with that, I say, take some time to let it all digest. There was a lot of information shared during these half-day sessions, and take an opportunity to exhale. I know there's been some mindfulness opportunities throughout the 3 days. So remember to use those exercises in your day-to-day, the time that you're working. Take those breaths and take time to exhale. So we've heard some really dynamic speakers, from Jonah Berger to Forrest Alton, Casey Banks, Sarah Schroeder. And then again, we rounded out with hearing from some grantees as well, but also today with Rachel. And so again, I'm not going to re-emphasize everything that they shared or stated, but just want to encourage you to use those tips and those strategies as much as you can. And we'd love, as someone has already mentioned, to hear your feedback on how it's working with learning and implementing those new strategies. So today, again, you had an opportunity to network with each other, and we always want to build in those opportunities. We hear you loud and clear on your evaluation forms that you want opportunities to talk with one another. So we value that, and we try to make that a part of all of your trainings. And again, it was a great closing that we had today, supporting resilience in organizations and communities. And as Risa mentioned in her opening on Tuesday, when we had the opening session, Risa's our director, I also want to reiterate that we encourage you to complete your training and evaluation forms. It's important that we hear back from you so that we know how we can improve topics. Are there additional topics you'd like to have training on? How we can improve this virtual training experience? Because I think we're going to be in this posture for a little bit longer. So with that, please share your feedback. That's really important to us. Also, there are some updates I'd like to share. So I'm going to switch gears. Then I'll come back with some additional thank yous and kudos. So I know that you typically want to hear what's happening in the federal office, particularly as it impacts your projects, your programs. So just to share a few of those updates with you, We do have funding opportunity announcements that staff are working hard and feverishly to have those completed, reviewed, and published. We do not have publication dates. I know that you're anxious to know what those dates are, as you do know that this is a transition year, transition in executive leadership for the federal government. And so as new persons are being onboarded, they want to have an opportunity to take a look at what we are actually publishing. And so we have been told that they'll expedite their review, but those funding opportunity announcements are definitely forthcoming. And the ones that we are working on currently, your project officers are drafting, are listed here on the slide. We have the state prep, competitive prep, the prep innovative strategies or PREIS, tribal prep, our general departmental SRAE, and our Title V competitive SRAE, and the approximate funding that we currently have available. The funding may fluctuate slightly, but that gives you an estimate. And many of you may have already gone to grants.gov, that website, to explore the forecasts that we put out probably last summer. And so the next step in the process is for those funding opportunity announcements to be published and available to you to make application. Also, we know that you have been asking for updates as it relates to the COVID-19 flexibilities. We are working on that. And I want to say thank you so much for your responses to the COVID-19 survey. We've been surveying you about TNTA needs as well. And so thank you so much for your feedback. We're now in the process of utilizing that information to update the FAQs, frequently asked questions for COVID-19 flexibilities. So if you can give us a little bit of time on that, we'll get that information right out to you. Okay. All right. What's exciting and coming up and on the horizon right around the corner is our annual conference. We had planned to be in Atlanta this year, but our plans are not going to be able to come to fruition in that respect. So we'll be having a virtual conference, as you probably already know. The dates are here. What's exciting to announce at the end of this training is you should have received an email on yesterday noting that the abstract submission website is now currently available. So if you have very much innovative, creative strategies and tools that you're using and working with your youth population, if there are updates you want to share about how you've been innovative in this virtual world with data collection and the like, please share those abstracts with us. And the deadline is March 12th. Next slide. We always want to emphasize that the exchange is a repository where you can find lots of information, resources. RTI has been our TNTA contractor for some time, and they do a phenomenal job of developing resources in collaboration with some of our thoughts and ideas, as well as your feedback on what will be helpful as you work with program participants. And so again, encouraging you to take advantage of those resources. Even the trainings from this week, we'll be making those available on the exchange as well. And as I think it was Katie who mentioned earlier today, make sure that you're registered so that you can access training materials that are not public facing. But again, take advantage of those resources. We developed some resources that are specifically for working with parents and also creating safe spaces for facilitation. Those came out of another contract that we have, but they're available on the exchange. So feel free to take advantage and utilize those great resources and tools as well. The last thing I do want to bring to your attention, because adulthood preparation subjects are a critical component to the work that you do, it's even more critical now with the social isolation and distancing that we're experiencing, particularly in your work with youth. So take a look at the new resource guide. It provides you some strategies and tools that you can use for enhancing your adulthood preparation subject implementation. Next slide. And want to also, I think you're primarily aware of the We Think Twice campaign. Again, it's through a different contract that RTI supports for us, but there are a plethora of resources that are available that you can use to integrate in your work for engagement with youth. You may not necessarily be able to incorporate it in your actual programming because I know that you're focused on fidelity, but these are great tools and resources, add-ons to your programs, just to keep young people engaged, again, during this time of virtual connectivity. And with that, with the We Think Twice campaign and some of those youth-focused products, we've been very, very successful nationwide and having youth just to be active as far as participating in contests. We've had contests where they could submit quotes. We had an overwhelming number of youth across the nation who submitted their artwork. We had an art contest. And so again, that's another resource that you have available through social media to keep young people engaged. Again, don't forget your evaluation forms. They are super critical. And just a couple of final closing remarks. Again, want to thank you so much for your work in your communities, what you're doing with youth across the nation and the territories and tribal lands. We know that this is a challenging time and it's an unprecedented time. And we hope that you've learned some new skills, connected with some new colleagues, and you're leaving this virtual training armed with more strategies for approaching your daily work. We encourage you to share the great work you are doing on our comment wall. I think Katie mentioned that earlier today as well. That's connected to the Exchange website. This wall is only visible to our adolescent pregnancy prevention grantees, and it's designed to be a place where you can share insights, ask questions. I think you can even upload photos and videos. So it's a very useful community of practice site that you can take advantage of. And last, I just want you to remember to always reach out to your project officer or the RTI, our TNTA provider at apptta@rti.org. If you'd like additional training, technical assistance support, individualized TA for your specific program. And finally, I just want to thank Patrice Moss, who is a project officer with the APP program, as well as Taya McMillan for their hard work in ensuring that this training was not just successful with your participation, but informative and useful for your time. So again, thanks everyone. And I'm going to turn it back over to Taya. I'm not sure if there are some other final announcements, but I just want to say continue to take care, and we appreciate the hard work that you do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone for participating. We will see you again soon.